Hey, we're live
Okay.
now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our panel discussion on youth leadership and community service. And today we're going to talk about how young people can make a positive impact in their communities through leadership and service. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves now.
Effat, would you like to go first?
Hi everyone, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Effat Jabeen. I am on the advisory board with Women to Women Forum. Prior to this, I used to serve as executive director on Women to Women Forum alongside my co-panelists, Sabina and Amara. I have since stepped down and I am part of the advisory board at this time. And that's my side hustle. I am a full-time physician and that's my day job.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amara Mushtaq, and like Ifit mentioned, I am on the executive board of Women to Women Forum, and I'm also a program director of Elevate Youth Voices. And I'm very passionate about youth advancement and leadership, especially being a first generation child of an immigrant. I think it's a very important topic, definitely to discuss. Outside of this, I work for Scotiabank, and I am a product manager in their technology and finance sector.
Okay, and me, I'm Sabina. I've been part of Women to Women Forum since the past 5 years. Um, and I'm a senior research analyst for my company, Clarivate. I research vaccines. But prior to that, I've been a part of the community since 2018. I used to work on shows, events, and then when I joined Women to Women, I joined their yearly gala, and I joined their other programs, mostly on the marketing end. And my goal is to bring a platform to our youth community youth talents. So we did that with Elevate Youth Voices at the open mic that Amara Mushtaq leads, direct actually, and that's my goal. My goal is to bring out the artists and give them a platform, a stage to showcase their talent. Aroush, you're
So, I first want to start with a question just for all of you to speak generally. How can we inspire young leaders to create positive changes in their communities? I want to start with, let's say, Amara.
Yeah, so in order to, I guess this is speaking from just the past few years, as far as like our engagement when it comes to youth and being, the last few years being involved in the community as well as a youth member. I think part of ensuring that we inspire, how we can inspire young leaders to create positive changes, ensuring that they're part of the conversation within the community at large and not isolating them, because at the end of the day, in order to create leaders, you need to also involve those people with leadership, with leadership within the community, so that they can learn from them, and one day, like, the baton gets passed over to them. So that could be through events that are hosted, making sure that they're part of some type of advisory aspect of the events. So there's a youth, youth insight into it. That can also be a mentorship, aligning them with other leaders within the community, so they get that one-on-one valuable time with other leaders.
Do you want to add anything, Effat?
You're muted.
Okay. So building on to what Amara already mentioned, I think a big aspect of inspiring next generation of youth would be to celebrate their accomplishments, whether it's a small or big accomplishments. I think we should always celebrate anything that's been completed by the group. I think part of the example I can give is that in the past, the youth wing has led by Amara. We've done certain initiatives such as toy drive for Ramadan and upcoming Eid, which is something that Amara has been doing for the past few years, and there are volunteers involved during the gift wrapping. and also delivering of those toys. And at the end of that event, we celebrate and hold a little ceremony to celebrate the volunteers and all the work that they've put into that. And same thing with any event that we do. We always appreciate the volunteers to make sure that they feel included and they feel inspired by their involvement, and they take the lead in future events.
Just to finish up on that question, so what we do is, especially after Woman to Woman, our International Women's Day, that's also coming up. What we do is we provide them citations. That's directly from our this year. It's from Shama Heather, and those citations, again, it's like a token of their. It's like an appreciation that you've done something, so they feel valuable.
Great discussion. So, what nuanced strategies do you guys think can be used to sort of cultivate culture synergy and collective action amongst youthful volunteers engaged in community service? You can start off, Amara.
Yeah, so I guess I would say definitely being transparent and clear on the vision of, whether it's an event or a program or a nonprofit. It's important, I think, especially for youth, to have a clear idea of like what they're putting themselves into, as well as if that vision aligns with them. If community service is something that at the end of the day we all do, as a volunteer opportunity. And so if we have to be engaged in the places where we're passionate about and where we feel, our visions are resonated, right? Like where the needs that we personally need or the aspirations we have, we want to make sure that whatever we put, wherever we volunteer, that organization, that program, that event represents that. So as I think it's very important to be clear on like a shared vision, and then making sure that when we involve youth. So this is one thing that I always try to make sure that when we have volunteers go to events that are outside of the program, like let's say we work with another nonprofit and they have a volunteer event going on, I usually like to vet out what that volunteer event is. So I know that when my youth like volunteers go to those events, they're not just kind of being used as quote unquote free labor, because I don't think that at the end of the day, like that's going to benefit them in the long run, because these kids are, passionate and ambitious. And I think it's very, very important to, harness that passion and not use it as like free labor. So that clarification on like making sure that, okay, if you're going to be volunteering here, like this is what they're trying to accomplish, and making sure that the tasks that they're given are related to the volunteer work that they had thought that they were getting into.
Okay. Do you have anything you guys want to add on, Sabina or Effat?
Certainly. So, building up on what Amara has already mentioned, I think leading by example is a huge thing that we can do to try to effectively engage youth volunteers. Is show them what we've already done. And like Amara mentioned, like if you're involving youth in a new program or a new initiative, show them what kind of work you've already done, whether you're taking them to a new group, involving them in a new group, or whether you're starting a new initiative, showing them, the work that you've already done, and the results that you already have. I think it just building up on that certainly encourages youth to join groups like this.
And just adding on to both of you, the same thing. Again, if it's a common goal, like, and their vision is clear on what it is, say, for example, the gifts for Eid, they know that they're about to go help a child who is in need of those toys. It's a collective group. They're comfortable with doing that project. They're excited about it. Or and it's not just that. Our youth end up going to trips with us. Like we have our adventure program in the summer, so they'll have like an activity together, so they're comfortable with each other as well. So it's not like they're meeting a new group of people each time, and it takes time to break the ice. So at this point, a lot of volunteers have worked with each other multiple times, so they're comfortable in that environment.
So we actually have a question in the chat. I'll show it. They're asking what are some ways that youth can get involved in community service, especially through Women to Women?
I think I let Amara take the lead on this one since she's done a lot of initiatives for woman to woman.
So within Women to Women Forum, we have a program called Elevate Youth Voices that Aroush is on, I'm on, Sabina is a part of, and there are usually yearly events that we have. We actually have an upcoming event for our International Women's Day conference and gala. And that's where we're going to be fundraising for a women shelter home that we have in New Jersey. And we also are going to celebrate women that are, our neighborhood heroes that are doing amazing work in our community and recognizing their efforts. So we have that as an upcoming like youth volunteer event. If you want to just stay connected with us, you could definitely go on our Instagram and find us at Elevate Youth Voices. You can also go on our website, women2womenforum.org, and click under programs, and you'll see the various programs we have. And one of them is Elevate Youth Voices.
And in addition to what Amara already mentioned, I would like to say that if anybody out there has something in their mind that they would like to start as a new initiative that's not already listed under Elevate Youth Voices, we're very open to new ideas and suggestions, and we'll happily work with you to start a new initiative if that's something that you're passionate about.
So we have another question. It says, oftentimes volunteer groups may lag in staying consistent in their efforts. How do you keep young volunteers engaged throughout the year? And if you aren't able to, how do you deal with the lag?
So, volunteer programs, I think this is a great question because this is something that I think we've all experienced. Not just, with our specific programs or, nonprofit, but like with other nonprofits as well. Right. So we know that like at the end of the day, nonprofits are, primarily made up of volunteer, um, you know, individuals that outside of their daily life, they take the time out and they want to pursue something that they're passionate about. So there's always going to be this factor of maybe inconsistency as far as in a specific program or in a nonprofit. So what we try to do as a nonprofit is we align with other organizations so that during the times where we might have a gap in our annual yearly events, we offer to our volunteers that that there are other events happening with other nonprofits as well that we collaborate with. And that also, at the end of the day, brings to the point of collaboration in a community is so important. We don't want to be the one stop shop, quote unquote, that you would say, for your volunteerism, right? We want to make sure that at the end of the day, within a community, we are volunteering, even ourselves, right? Even the board volunteers with different organizations as well. And we're making sure that as a community we're staying together and sharing ideas and attending each other's events. So that's where I always recommend, like even for my youth volunteers, if there's no event coming up within the program itself, we have other Pakistani nonprofits in the community where I always I'll send their flyers over to like volunteers that are interested or are available a certain weekend, and they say, hey, I'm looking for volunteer opportunities. So I'm more than happy to do that as well.
Just a quick excursion. I can also speak as someone who like volunteers in a lot of organizations and also helps lead a lot of nonprofits. I think encouraging kids, like as you said, to go out of their own way to sort of pursue their passions is definitely needed. Not encouraging them to just stay loyal to one nonprofit. Like throughout the year, if my group isn't active, we post different events that they can go out and do it. It's related to our own mission. I think that's also really good at keeping kids engaged. So, next, I want to ask, in what profound ways do you think that these youth driven initiatives serves as pillars for enduring sustainable progress within like localities?
So I'll take that question. I'll start off. So I think when when we look at a society as a whole, and even if we look at just the concept of community building, right, we work on a lot of initiatives within the community where they might be specific to like a specific group, right? So it could be like for women or for a specific industry, whatever it is. But alongside of like, for example, in Women to Women Forum, we're specifically targeted audience is women, but we also engage like the larger community. We have allies that are part of the community. We have, like I mentioned, the youth program that's part of the nonprofit, because we recognize that at the end of the day, if we are supposed to help and empower women, we have to also empower their families. We also have to empower their significant others that may not, like their husbands, their brothers, like everyone else, in order to ensure that women are empowered at large, and that it's sustainable, right? So that in the, as even for youth, like as they get older, they're going to be the next men and women in our society. So if we completely isolate them and just focus on, okay, we're just going to empower women of today, there it's not going to be sustainable in the long run, unfortunately. And so we have to focus on the larger community as a whole while focusing on our target audience.
And I think adding on to what Amara is mentioning, I think a very important point in this particular matter is that when you're at a certain point in life, when you're an adult and you have a career and you're set in your life in a certain way, it's hard to bring more people into doing volunteer work, whereas youth, when you're still developing your interest and trying to find where you best fit in the community, and you try out different organizations and different type of activities, if this is something that you like, you certainly bring more of your friends and more of your family members into projects like that, and it certainly expands and solidifies that particular initiative in the community, and can certainly build up on that over long term. So there's certainly a role for youth-led and youth-based projects in the community.
And just adding to all of that is that when we all started, we were all very still youth, some, but when we started, we didn't know each other like that. But we ourselves, we're an example. We became friends. We did our program. Open Mic Night is one of those programs that came out of our friendship. That, hey, this is something that we um, all our thoughts align. This is what we want to do, and we made it happen. So it and when we also have a hiking program, right? So we do have these, if these volunteers want to come out, they're part of the Women to Women, they come to these hiking adventures, their families meet other families. Now all of a sudden, now you have a whole group of people who now are interacting with each other. Now there's other events that are taking place, they're meeting each other. In the long run, now you have your whole community, right then and there. Your families know each other, the fathers know each other, brothers and sisters. You guys are probably going to the same high school that you're connecting through this organization.
So we have a question in the chat. How can one encourage volunteerism in their child from a young age so that they're involved in altruism throughout their life?
So this is, as soon as I read this question, I thought about this other related question that someone had asked. So I had mentioned that, like, I'm in finance and tech, and I'm also a very huge advocate of financial literacy, and especially for women to be financially independent. So they say, like, how do you, like, learn about something with your children? How do you teach your children, to value financial literacy and all these things? And the best way, and specifically now, even for volunteerism, I think it holds true, is the best way to involve someone at a young age, right, is to make sure that you're doing it yourself, right? Um, and involving them in what you're doing, right? So sitting at home and telling your child, okay, you should do XYZ, um, isn't going to be isn't going to leave a great impact on them until you're doing it yourself and you're showing them that you're happy in doing what you're doing, right? Sometimes we'll see parents working certain jobs where they're like, they don't like it, and then they, always talk negatively about it, and that doesn't help a child feel. But then they tell their child, you have to do the same field, so that doesn't really motivate the child. So same thing, like, if you're involved in an organization as an adult, as a parent, and you're volunteering yourself and you enjoy it, you should also make sure that, if you want your child involved in it as well, that you're involving them in the capacity of where they're happy and, excited as well about it, right? They're not being dragged along, because all you're going to do is you're just going to impress these negative feelings on them related to that topic. I think naturally, when you involve children in the things that you do yourselves, at a very young age, and show them a positive side of it, whether that comes to religion, philosophy, volunteerism, finance, or anything, they will naturally want to be part of it, because at the end of the day, it's giving them a positive impression.
I think it's a really good point that that Amara has mentioned. But I would like to build on that. Is that you want to make sure that the child's interest is there. And when we use the word volunteer and community service, it could literally mean anything. It doesn't have to be one specific thing. In our community, when we think of volunteering, people talk about volunteering at masjid or volunteering at after school events and things like that. You have to see where the person's interest lies, and if you see them that they're not into one thing, it's okay. You shouldn't really push them into something that they're not really inspired by. At the end of the day, everybody has some kind of passion, be it an industry, be it gaming, be it religion or philosophy or what have you. Everybody has some kind of interest, and there's no shortage of volunteering in whatever field that you decide to volunteer in. And I think, again, like, I'll go back to our own examples. Like, there's three of us sitting here. We come from three very different fields, and we all volunteer in our own fields, whatever our area of interest is. I tend to gravitate more towards the medical work that I do, because that's my passion. That's where my passion lies. And I've organized certain events, and I've worked with a lot of different organizations in that manner. Amara, like she already mentioned, financial literacy, and I've seen her work on that for the amount of time that I've known her, as well as advocating for youth leadership, which is always it's an uphill battle in our community, specifically when everybody talks about giving youth a platform but not actually doing it. And here, Amara, spearheaded this program where she actually put youth up front and gave them the platform, and wanted them to start their own initiative. And Sabina comes in with her experience of marketing, and again, just blows everyone out of the water in the community when it comes to the skill set that she has. So it really is, it boils down to the interest that the child has. And you should try different things. If one field is not working out, and you're noticing that the kid doesn't have interest in that, you really shouldn't be pushing them beyond a certain point to go into that. And that tends to happen a lot, unfortunately, in our society. But I think we should be mindful of that, and let the child or the youth develop their own interest, and should encourage them in that direction.
So I just wanted to, I know Sabina, you're gonna respond. I also read the second part of this question, and it says so that they're involved in altruism throughout their life. Right. So altruism is a concept of where you give with no expectation of getting anything back. And that is content and satisfying for that person. I think a lot of times, unfortunately, in even in volunteering and even in philanthropy, we see where it's like it's a very give and take mindset, where what it's not money that's being given or taken, it's more of like reputation and namesake. So if you want your child to be involved from an altruistic aspect, because I think that's the most important thing when it comes to volunteerism, I would make sure that they're not, you talk to them and let them know that at the end of the day, when you volunteer in the community, there's a hadith that says, like, you should give with your right hand, and then without your left hand knowing, right? So you should be able to volunteer your time, and you should be an example for your child where you volunteer your time for not looking for the benefit of making, a name or a role or anything like that. Whether that comes naturally, that's perfectly okay. And it's okay to take on those leadership roles, but it shouldn't be for the intent of that. And when that, namesake is being slipped away, it shouldn't personally affect you when it comes to philanthropy, because at the end of the day, you were giving your time, right, for a altruistic purpose. So not ever being tied right down to, oh, I need to like specifically stick with this organization so I can build a career in volunteerism within this organization. I think that will really take someone away from the altruistic aspect of things. So just not tying her down to very specific, like ideas of like creating a name for yourself. And then being that example for your child it would definitely help them understand the value in altruism.
As a new mom, obviously, I'm not gonna, coming from a mother's perspective, I'm not gonna push my child just because I'm part of this organization. You have to become, a part of this organization. Again, it all depends on the child's interest. What if they're interested in, um, music or art or painting? You know, um, for me, coming from someone who's born here, raised here, I wasn't a part of any organization. The only volunteering I did was, cleanups in high school and whatnot. I actually joined Women to Women later, very, very late in life, or any organization very late in life. I was just more college work and that. So it actually depends on a parent's priority. They need to prioritize that. Hey, listen, I also want you to join an organization. Put it there, because my parents, they didn't have that knowledge, to be honest. They didn't have that knowledge. Hey, my child needs to go in an organization. Maybe she needs to volunteer off timing for these things, and this will later help her later in life. We were new here, so these were things that I had to learn. But now, me knowing I have this whole community in front of me, I would want to introduce her to everything. I mean, and then at the end of the day, it's a child's decision. You would, again, like Amara said, you don't want to force them into something that they're not interested in, because then they'll just resent and walk away from it. um if Find out what your child's interest is, put them on that path, because then it won't seem like it's work. It'll be more of, hey, I like this, so I'm doing what I like.
Okay, so we have another question. What measures can we take to properly prepare our youth for the current situation, aside from domestic issues, rather global dilemmas? If,
So
and
I
if you
feel like
want to take
Iffa would
that
be a good person for this.
Say that
it's a
again.
loaded question.
No, if I think Iffa would be a good person to respond to this because of her.
Okay. So my answer, like these are fantastic questions. And every time I read a question, my immediate response always goes to lead by example, and that seems to be the theme of a lot of questions today, and a lot of answers that I'll be giving is that change begins with you. And whether that change means changing things domestically or making it a global impact, it starts with you. And so you have to start with yourself and be involved. Um, and then again, once you're involved, you can expand that project into your community and take youth with you, and again, like, lead by example. And if it is their interest, then they will get involved. And if it's not their interest, that the least you can do is educate them on the matter. Whether they want to get involved or not, I think it's up to them. Again, like, we really shouldn't be pushing people, or youth, into areas that they're not interested in. Not everybody's going to be interested in global politics, and not everybody's going to be interested in talking about domestic abuse, and not everybody's going to be talking about the medical subsection that I'm interested in. So you really can just educate them and give them proper channels to get more education and get more information about it, and lead by example. And I'll leave it at that.
So, oh, okay. Are we answering the question?
No, we can keep going.
Oh, okay.
The question was on how can we prepare them rather from domestic
Okay.
issues about global
Yeah,
dilemmas.
no worries. Um, So, I mean, definitely, right, at the end of the day, leading by example is important, which is why, we focus on community development rather than specifically just a specific audience within the community. But going back to, an earlier response I had given, being clear on, what's going on, what you're doing. Transparency is very, very important when it comes to, explaining to your child on what's going on in the world, explaining to them what are the different concepts that are happening around, what does that mean to them, what does that mean for your home, right, and your home values. Not just telling them you should do X or you should do Y or you can't do A and you can't do B. That's never going to work in the long run. It might work when they're very young and they don't have like the cognitive reasoning to be able to figure out how else other than throwing a tantrum in responding to you, but it doesn't work in the long run as they grow older. So, from a very young age, even when they're a child, right? Like even a toddler, when a toddler is just crying relentlessly, right? That at that point in their life, they don't know any other type of emotion and getting attention or, being able to ask for something, right? So you have to really get down to their level and guide them on like, okay, if you're hungry, just like you can rub your tummy, right? If you want to go outside somewhere, you can point out to the window for a toddler, right? So they know how to communicate. So same thing with as they get older, right? Sitting down, getting level headed with them and communicating with them, like what are their questions, what are their concerns, or if there's something happening outside in the world, that you're seeing, and then your school kid probably is seeing in their school, having a conversation with them, an open conversation with them on how they feel about it and, what your thoughts are about it. I think those are the best measures to take. Open communication is very important with, boundaries in place because boundaries are very, very important in establishing for your child and for yourselves too.
Okay, so our next question is, how do the profound bonds of mentorship and guidance sculpt the character of basically emerging leaders and sort of instills a profound sense of duty towards civic engagement? Any of you can take the lead on that.
I think we've sort of touched on this topic earlier as well, but I would reiterate what I had mentioned earlier, specifically to this question: is that how do mentors shape young leaders and encourage them to get involved? I think specifically the society that we live in, um, celebrating small wins it's a big thing in our community, and part of getting youth involved is to again recognize their accomplishments and not punishing their shortcomings. I think that's again in our community that's something that we could all do better as a society, is to not punish the shortcomings rather than see how we can make things better. So this is something that it's a shift change that I've seen in the last maybe 10, 15 years. I'll give my example of my my work, and I'm sure Amara and Sabina can give you certain examples as well. Is that in my work, in my field of work, if there's something that you did not wrong, but let's say like something that you should not have done in a certain way, or let's say if you did something wrong, they wouldn't come out and straight up say, hey, this is something that you did wrong, except they word it in a way that, hey, this is an area of improvement or this is an area of opportunity. And it just you just put a different spin on it, and you look at it in a different angle, and it really does make me want to improve myself in that particular area, or make things better rather than like, how I did this wrong. So it's the mentality. It's how you word it. Language matters, wording matters, and it does go a long way. So I think encouraging youth and celebrating small wins goes a long way.
I'm going to use my example for this one. So when I initially met Nusrat for Woman to Woman, I was not part of any organization at that time. And you say how to shape young leaders. What she did is she gave me sort of a, you can say, a small leadership rule. Like, hey, you're really good at this. Why don't you take the lead on this, right? And that got me sort of involved. Like, okay, yeah, I'm good at this. I like the cause. It's something that I relate to. So I like it. I'm comfortable with it. So and then I went for it. And then, mashallah, it's been over 5 years now, right? So the interest again has to be there. Some kind of a like a leadership role, you can say. So when you're having these kids volunteer, they want to feel important, and giving them like a small leadership role is Arush. Yesterday we went over this platform, StreamYard. You had no idea about it, and now you this is your first panel with it. You're going to be, now you could hold multiple panels with it. It's something, you give you the lead on it, and now you can, it can take over. So I think that small leadership roles uh, take you forward. uh, that's, mhm.
Okay, so we have another question from the chat. In what ways has volunteering changed your perspectives, whether it be your line of work, community, etc.?
So so for changing my perspective, I think you learn a lot when it comes to community development. So I've been part of the organization since I graduated college. Prior to that, I have always volunteered, even when I was, 13, 14. I was part of our libraries, like Teen Library Connection, where like kids would come and volunteer for the summer. And then from there, I became like an assistant, assistant to the program. So I was like, directing the kids and making sure that, like we were all the tasks were done in the library. So like, and then volunteering at a museum. So like, I've always volunteered at a very young age. And for me, it's just, I never thought about when I wanted to do it, it was more so of like, I want to make the best of my summer days, and and the time that I have. And I think I initially started off with that mindset as like a very young teen. Um, and then I realized like, wow, like, you get to meet different people and you get to you learn different aspects of people's lives that you may not have learned, like, sitting in a classroom, sitting at home. So for me, like, that gave me a more, diverse perspective on the different types of people that are in our community locally, because, from volunteering at the library and the museum. And then in the past, I would say less than a bit of a decade, all throughout my 20s, I've been part of Women to Women Forum. And so that's where I really got to engage with the Pakistani community, specifically, right? Because before that, when you're in high school and elementary and middle school, I lived in a community that wasn't heavily Pakistani. It was, it was diverse with different races. So I never really was involved in the Pakistani community. But as I got older and, I had graduated college, I was like, there's a part of me where I feel like my personal identity of who I am felt a little amiss, where it was like, yeah, like I love being around diverse mindsets and people, but at the same time, I'm not 100% when I go to Pakistan, like I'm not 100% Pakistani, and I don't feel at home there. And then when I am here, it's just like I'm not 100% American. So I really wanted to define that identity, and that's why. And also, the struggles of being a woman in Pakistani American community, I started seeing kind of those differences. So I was like, well, where does this identity best fit? And that's where, when we started working on Women to Women Forum, I felt like I was able to see my identity in it. And that's what really drove me towards this nonprofit. So it's interesting. I feel like when you start volunteering at a very young age, your perspective on volunteerism really evolves with you. Uh, but at the end of the day, I think that altruistic aspect of it definitely continues to kind of stay with you. So when you start as an adult, start seeing, others that are involved in a non-altruistic way, it's kind of like it bothers you because when you're because you were involved at a very young age, volunteering just because you wanted to volunteer. So it's I think it's an evolving process for sure.
I'll add to that. And certainly an evolving process. Certainly, it's a dynamic process. It's a never-ending process. Like, and throughout high school, a lot of times, teenagers will volunteer for one thing or another, mainly because it needs to go on the application because colleges, the admission committee looks at the amount of volunteer work that you've done. And usually that's how most people get started in volunteer. Somehow Sabina skipped that and still got into college. I don't know how that happened. But most people do start out volunteering in high school to get into college, and vice versa. Volunteer in college to get into grad school and things like that. The perspective does change as you grow into the amount of work that you do and the kind of work that you do. One thing I would add to this is that uh, when you realize and this is, again, this goes outside of, you're done with college and you're done with high school, or even when you're still in it, but the motive behind volunteering changes, is that when you realize um, the the knowledge and the privilege that we all have, be it the privilege of having time or the privilege of having a specific skill set, or privilege of having money that you see that other people don't have, that you could do away with, volunteering your time, volunteering your skill set, volunteering money, whatever way you can. It certainly, moves you towards that altruistic road that Amara was talking about earlier, as opposed to just having done something for the sake of showing the community, hey, look what I've done, or putting it on your resume. It certainly gives you a new perspective towards life in general when you see the things that you have, again, be it money, be it time, or a specific skill set. And once you come to that realization, and this is me personally, and now that I feel like it becomes your responsibility to give back to the community, because you realize that not everybody is rich in time and rich in having money and rich in having certain skill sets, because for one reason or another they couldn't get to it, because not everybody's equal in society. And if you have whatever you have to offer, as volunteer, I feel like it becomes your duty at that point to bring that to your community and lift other people up who otherwise might not have had that opportunity to do so.
Just adding
Okay.
a little bit more to that. Sorry. Again, being a new mom. I mean, personally, I can't wait till my daughter is going to school so I can volunteer for school. Like that's going to be a completely new new experience for me too, and I look forward to it. I mean, it does change over time. Luckily for me, yes, I did get to college without volunteering, but in college then I started joining programs there. Like I had the MSA and I volunteered my time there, and then from there I was doing shows with the MSA, comedy shows and whatnot. And then that kind of was on the side after my full-time job, whatever time I could take out. uh, uh, I did my other side projects with it, and I enjoyed it until and then when Woman to Woman came about, then we've been here.
And that's the thing, though, right? Not every time that you do something, you get to put the label of volunteer on it. You do a lot of things that you don't even realize that you are volunteering for. Specifically, what Sabina just mentioned. Earlier she said that, oh, she didn't start volunteering until she got involved with Woman to Woman, which was just 5 years ago. And now she's mentioning that she did all these things in college, with MSA and other organizations. So you don't have to put the label of volunteer on
Volunteering, you're
every single activity
participating.
that you do, as long as you participate in the community. I think in
Participate.
the long run it does
Yes.
translate into volunteer work.
Okay, so we have another question in the chat. So, how has volunteering translated in the workforce, and what skills can the youth learn throughout volunteering?
I think we just talked about that. Any skill set that you want to learn, it goes back to your interest. I think part of volunteer work is giving the opportunity to maybe pick up something new that you would not have thought of otherwise, and that goes back to having opportunities to to learn new things or to be involved in new things. I mentioned earlier that you have to have certain interests in order for you to step into something and volunteer for that particular field. But other times, you'll see that somebody who had no idea what that field was about, and then they'll step into it and they'll like it, and they start showing interest and learning more about that. So it really is about creating opportunities where people can come together and learn from each other. And I think that's something that we have led by example with Woman to Woman Forum, the three of us being one of the prime examples.
And I would also add to that that, when we think about the workforce, we think of it as a very transactional, very setup where you go to work, you get paid, you come home. And in certain areas that's true, and that, some people do enjoy it being that way. But what I've noticed as being, volunteering throughout my life is that when you volunteer, you do it without the concept of that you're going to get anything back. And when you apply that same concept in your workplace, right, not saying that everyone has to go above and beyond all the time, because if you do it all the time, then you're just being taken advantage for if nobody's recognizing it. But being able to do that sometimes in the workforce, you'll realize that you actually open up more doors for yourself, in maybe connecting with a person that in your job that you may have not have ever connected with without be taking that first person and initiating the conversation, having a coffee and chat with them, right? Like in the workforce, you could be part of a employee resource group, an ERG, where that's completely volunteering, for a specific cause within your workplace. And through that, you meet another, other colleagues or similar, whether you work with other, like, clients or stakeholders that are within the company, and you find another opportunity of a project through those engagements. I think that without if you didn't cultivate kind of this concept of, okay, I'm going to apply myself in a place without expecting anything back, you may have not have been given that opportunity. So definitely, right, being able to take on opportunities or take that, you know, I would say risk of like, okay, like reaching out to someone without expecting anything back. Those are skill sets that you do get when you are volunteering. Other aspects are, right, of leadership. When you volunteer, you start understanding how delegation and management aspects of, like, like how an event is run, that you can take back and translate it back into your workforce. And then more interestingly, within my personal career, when I had graduated college, I worked at a corporate company. And then that next year, after working for a little bit, I decided that, I wanted to take time and put myself with, engage myself in a nonprofit. So I actually took a break, a gap in my career to be part of a nonprofit and, other like volunteer opportunities. And when I went back into my career, the first thing that, like, I remember my hiring manager asking me, she was like, "Well, why did you take that gap? Why didn't you just move on to the next job?" And I had explained to her that I wanted to make sure, I wanted to follow what I'm passionate about at that time. And I explained to her that, the skill sets that I learned in my volunteering helps me build that leadership acumen that I can now bring today to the company. So, that's in itself an example of how you can take volunteer opportunities and skill sets back into, like, your career, wherever you choose to go.
So I'm gonna add on to this. So my company actually offers us 40 hours of volunteer hours. We have programs within my company also. Um, so our it's not, and then coming back to what skills you learn throughout volunteering, most of these things Amara has answered, but I'm gonna bring it down to basics. Just creating a post online. A lot of new high schoolers, they don't know how to use Canva right away. Luckily, when you join a group of volunteers, and then everybody's assigned a task, you're basically learning those life skills or those skill sets out of the classroom. There's a lot of things that you learn out of the classroom. You're meeting new kids. You're learning new social abilities. You're learning how um, uh, where you understand where you're fitting into a higher thing. When you go to school, it's a school. You go to school, you come home. Now you're volunteering. You're taking your time out of your weekend. You know, you're meeting these new people. You're gonna learn how to adjust with different mindsets, but on the same goal. So you learn how to interact with a new group, I want to say a new set of people. And then within that, you're learning now. I'm going to give Amar's example. We do the gifts for them. I'm sure there's kids who show up at that who've never wrapped a gift in their life. Right? And then just that one thing is that now what? Guess what? At the end of this activity, I know how to wrap a gift. I don't know how to wrap a gift, so I have to show up to one of your gift wraps.
It's
We
funny.
we have to do a session after this to make sure you know how to wrap a gift.
But you know what's crazy though? They, even though the event is to volunteer to wrap the Eid gifts, these volunteers show up even though they don't know how to wrap a gift, but they show up because they want to be part of the process. So
You might not know how to wrap a gift, but guess what? They'll help cut the tape or they'll tie the bows
but I
or
love
something.
the fact that they show up, right? And that's what I mean by, like, that's when those are skill sets that at the end of the day, they're going into an event or a situation that they have no idea about, but they're like, I will learn through that process, and that's exactly the skill sets that you can take when you go into the workforce. Yeah, you might have maybe 7 out of 10 of the qualifications that a job is asking for. Still apply for it, right? You might learn the three like on the spot. It's fine. It's okay. You take on, it really helps in being risk averse too, where you're like, okay, I'm gonna take on that new, this opportunity that's in front of me.
And especially now that we're talking about workforce, I think it all starts with a conversation and just literally volunteering a conversation with somebody. You'll be surprised to see how many doors of opportunity it opens up for you. If you start a conversation with somebody, asking to learn a new skill set. Um, People who have that skill set, they will it makes them feel better that they can teach somebody the skill set that they have, especially if somebody's volunteering their own time to learn that skill set, whatever that skill set might be. I think starting a conversation to ask what they can offer and what they can learn, that goes a long way, especially being in workforce. This is something that we do every day. So initiating conversation is a big part of it, and it can open up infinite doors for you.
So my next question is that how can we ensure that like youth leadership programs reflect rich diversity of human experiences and overall just fosters profound understandings of inclusivity and equity? Because overall the nonprofits don't mean anything unless there's a shared idea of equity. And I feel like for the most part that should go without saying. Anyone can start.
Sorry, I was just reading the question.
How do we make sure that youth leadership programs include diverse perspectives and promote fairness for all? Okay. Yeah. So at the end of the day, I think, right, youth leadership programs for sure, making sure that we're including different, age groups as well. I think that's important. I mean, I know for Elevate Youth Voices, even when we do our different volunteer events, we have youth from the age of like 8 years old to 18, volunteering for the event. And, typically the 18-year-old, of course, would not be coming with their parent. They're coming on their own. They're either driving with a permit or, they're being dropped off. And the 8-year-old is coming with their parent. So we get to engage with, like, young kids with their parents and kind of see that parent-child relationship within the youth program, within the youth event, and then also see, connect with someone who's probably in high school or, going to college. And you get to see from a first person perspective of the different needs in instructions that are required. So the young kid will probably need guidance right from their parents, so they will communicate with the parent to help the kid, and then maybe just walk them through the task, while like the one who is 17 or 18, they just need an initial guidance of like what the task is, and then they go and do it themselves. And then what we also have seen is where there could be an 18-year-old that probably never has met this 8-year-old, and all of a sudden, in the midway through the event, the 18-year-old is helping the 8-year-old. So that, like we're already like that's also bridging this like generational gap within the youth event, where there's conversation happening, and as a youth, you get to, not only get instructions or guidance from someone who may be older than you, but you also are able to provide that to someone who's younger than you. So having multi generations of youth involved in an event where it's applicable, right, where it's appropriate, is a great way to like promote equity as well, because you get equitable perspectives on that event itself and how youth should be involved.
I would add to that that this is a little tricky one. The reason why I say that is because how do you make sure that you have diverse perspective and promote fairness? At the end of the day, it is a volunteer program, whatever program that is, whatever example that you want to take, and it is run by volunteers. And we may not have all perspectives within that particular small group that we're dealing with, and we may not have equal opportunity per se, in that particular project that they're working on. So it's not always possible to have the diverse perspective that someone might be looking for, which is why it's encouraged to be involved in different groups and be involved in different activities, so you do get to see a wider perspective and not just have a little snapshot of that one particular activity or one particular small group or subsection of it at any point. So yes, it is possible not to have a complete diverse perspective at all times.
I think the question was more direct, like from my perspective, it was more about including perspectives rather than having, because obviously with things like woman to woman, that's more focusing in on equality for South Asian women. That's obviously not focusing on like equality on every single level. It's more about just focusing on the oppressions of South Asian women. But I think the root of that cause is the fact that we have diverse perspectives and we are promoting fairness for all. So I think that was more of the question, like making sure that programs keep up with that. Because I know, especially in like workplaces and stuff, that's more prevalent these days, actually, that because people are more woke about fairness and equity, there seems to be sometimes if they get one person, one diverse person, it's kind of coined now as like the token diversity person. You know what I mean? Like say it's like a mostly male dominated company. If they have one woman on their board of officers, then they're still diverse. They're still looking for it. But in actuality, that's just the bare minimum that they're hitting. So I think the question was more directed like, how can we make sure that it's not just for token and it's not just to be commended, it's more about this is the outlook that we have, this is the mission that we're keeping up, sort of just promoting that idea.
Yeah, and I think so part of that is that when like in the example that you gave, right, if they're like to avoid tokenism, the events or the projects or the initiatives or even like the grants that they seek, sorry about that. Um, so any like basically initiative that is created from that board, or even like let's bring it back to like youth leadership programs, any event that we create in our program, we want to make sure that we're not excluding, we're focusing on the target audience of youth volunteers, but we're not excluding handpicking our volunteers based off specific skill sets that we think would be the best, making sure that we're including various diverse volunteers and making sure it's open, it's an open application for all, so that volunteers can sign up, whether they're young or older, whether they come from a lower income economic background or a higher income, whether they're different shades of skin tones or languages. We want to make sure that they can also be involved. And also for any of our events, right, even for our women nonprofit, while our target audience is women, and even for our youth program, while our target audience is youth, we don't exclude allies from participating. So what I mean by allies is, right, men participating in women empowerment initiatives, like elderly participating as guidance or providing their perspective in youth initiatives. So by not excluding those individuals and making sure that they're also included as allies, we can make sure that we get a more rounded kind of perspective of like what's going on. Because at the end of the day, youth initiatives, women initiatives, other type of gender or race specific or philosophy or anything it is specific initiatives, all come back to the fact that we as a society live together. So we need to make sure that we're, including everyone and it's open to everyone and their voices. But keeping in mind that, who is your target audience, right? Because you're not going to get anywhere if you're not, bringing the focus back to your target audience and providing them the tools to move forward.
So, with that being said, I want to wrap up the discussion today, and I want to thank everyone watching and obviously my panelists for joining in our discussion. And I want everyone to remember that by supporting and empowering our youth to take on these leadership roles and engage in service, together we build and cultivate brighter futures for our communities. And I want to implore everyone watching that if you continue to inspire and encourage the next generations of leaders, there's sure going to be a difference in the world.
Thank you.
For
Thank you
sure.
everyone
And
for
you,
having us.
and if anyone's out there and they want a mentor, we have Amara. She's like our best mentor here. Um, uh,
We have
I'm a bit
Sabina.
busy with my schedule, but we're always here to mentor, and we're always here to help out with any place that you're stuck on. We definitely give our experience, and hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and if you have any other questions, feel free to like comment them underneath this video, or you could always email us at women2womenforum@gmail.com, and more than happy to take your questions.
Thank you everyone for joining the discussion. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye. Good night.